big cough and then I'm ready. Here we go. And I think we are live. Hello, everyone. Really nice that everyone tuned in today. I wish you a very good morning, a very good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm Svea Becker, and I'm part of the SAP community team. And we are having a great live stream today with two speakers. We have Sergio Guerrero and Mohan Bachal. Both have been at the SAP Insight Track in Dallas last month, and they gave a presentation over there. And so we have today two interesting topics. We are going to start with Sergio. Sergio is the president of Shockwave Consulting, and he will talk about SAP AppGyver. And then, so more when Sergio is talking. And then we have Mohan, and he is the senior software engineer at Lockheed Martin, and he will talk about SAP HANA and more later when Mohan is talking. So everyone, welcome to today's call. And that has been said, I will of course share a lot of links during the live stream with all of you. So for example, links to the community profiles of Sergio and Mohan. So feel free to go to those links and check them out. And also, if you have questions, please write them in the chat. And we are going to cover them after the presentation. So maybe we start with Sergio, if there are any questions. And after Mohan has finalized his presentation, we are going to go there as well. So I think I have talked enough. Now I will put the spotlight to our presenters. Sergio, I hand over to you. The stage is yours. Good luck and have fun.
Thank you, Svea. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. Let me know if you can see it.
Not yet. No, yeah.
All right. So thank you, SAP community and Svea and Mohan and Catherine, everybody who's here. My name is Sergio Guerrero, work at Shockwave Consulting. I'm president here. And today I'm going to be talking about how to build a mobile app using SAP's AppGyver tool. This year I have been using it just for personal learning, then to come up with some demos, and I've been having a little bit of fun with it. There's a disclaimer slide here from SAP. Just taking a couple seconds. And then by the end of the presentation, I would like to share with you guys what SAP AppGyver is, what is the low-code, no-code platform, how to build an application like this on the UI, and then how to consume API data, how to deploy an application in AppGyver. And I think if we can accomplish those three things, we should be on our way to learning more about low-code, no-code. But I mentioned that's me. I've been working outside of AppGyver. I have been working on SAP HANA, UI5, Fiori. I've been a presenter at TechEd, at Sapphire, and the Insight Track in Latin America. And now this year we put one in Dallas. And you can find more about me and the blogs and all that in the SAP community. All right, so what is AppGyver? AppGyver is a low-code, no-code tool, and you can find it there for free on the AppGyver website. And that gives you free access to practice, to learn, to do a lot of the exercises for free. You know, anybody that wants to learn about this platform, they can start immediately. As you become more and more into it, and you said, okay, I want to use this tool and I want to integrate it with my SAP ecosystem, then The AppGyver also comes as a service in the business technology platform. You have to have a paid subscription per user, and you have a few additional features and capabilities that the free edition has. This tool is also a rapid application development tool, primarily geared towards citizen developers. And then if you start doing more advanced scenarios, then yes, full technical developers can take advantage of it. The citizen developers are those colleagues of ours who are primarily involved with the business, and they need to build something or they need to come up with a demo. And usually it takes some time between the time that they talk to the business and then they come back to us, and us technical developers come up with something. So I think SAP is doing a phenomenal job empowering this citizen developers to be able to put some of these demos together, show their business counterparts, and get feedback before we start getting into the more technical, more advanced scenarios. The technologies used within AppGyver are the React and React Native. And one of the reasons for that is that when you're creating an application with AppGyver, you can target multiple platforms. You can target a web environment, you can target an iOS platform, you can target an Android platform, and you can do all that building from the same code base and do the deployment immediately from the AppGyver Composer, which is the tool where you can set up your deployment. For me personally, every time I'm trying to learn a new tool or a new technology, I also want to see, okay, what is this tool compared to in other technologies? We can see that Mendix, Power Apps, and Flutter are similar tools. This one, for me, it was better because I didn't have to pay anything to start learning, and I was able to create apps and deploy. I can see it on my phone, I can see it on the browser, and that's basically what drew my attention to it when I started putting some of these blogs at the beginning of the year. So now, once you log in to the AppGyver tool, this is what the application may look like. In here, in my scenario, I have been working on several projects. Some of them have been learning, some of them have been demos, some of them have been, the one at the top left there was for the Insight track. And then some of those is just for me to, how do I compare this to when I'm doing Fiori development? How do I compare this to when I'm, consuming an OData service or an API, or, I'm really trying to understand the capabilities and go more in depth so I can grow and learn all this technical side of it. Let me change this to presenter mode. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So now, after you have logged into AppGyver, your screen's going to look different depending on your projects and all that. You can start going in. For me, when I'm starting a new application, every application is data driven, right? So how do we consume data, whether it's an OData service or a REST API? And the really cool thing about AppGyver is that it's not restricted to only consume data from SAP. I can consume data from pretty much any service that I can reach on the web. My first example that I did was to consume a very popular OData service out there on the web called Norwind. And this is how you would start that. You go here, you go to your data sources, you have to set up the base of the service, and you identify it with a name, and then you put the base URL. And this is where a little bit of technical knowledge is required, because you would need to understand, okay, when I need to read data from a service or from an OData service, how do I do that? If I need to save data, or if I need to create data, or if I need to delete data, what do I do? So within the AppGyver tool, it is, in my opinion, very easy to set up, because you set up the base, and then depending on the type of operation the citizen developer or the technical developer is trying to achieve, they can set up a GET request, which is to read data, a create record to go and do a post, to do an update record, or to do a delete record, right? So each one of these separate operations you can set individually. You can set the parameters that it needs to pass. You can set any header parameters, any query string parameters, any other information that that API would need to accomplish the operation and follow the contract that that API has. And one of the other examples here in a little bit, I will show the one that I was using from a REST API from AWS, but it follows the same rules. It doesn't matter, again, what the backend technology it is. So what is a REST API? A REST API, like I mentioned, you can do the 4 or 5 different types of operations. You can do a GET to read data. You can do a create, the update, and the delete. But in order to achieve that, then you need to understand, okay, here's the URL where the server lives. This is the credentials, which could be optional. Or, if you have a public API, then you don't need to pass credentials. And then each of the different operations would be the paths to the endpoint. It would be a different path, and also a different method if I am doing a GET or a update or a create or a delete. So you have to understand what method you're doing and what path you need to go to. Over here, it's when I was setting up from my AWS API, and I was doing a GET request to a collection, and a collection is a list or an array, right? So we're trying to get an entity set to come down. So here I'm doing the GET request and the configuration. And what I really like about this is that even as probably one of my top 3 favorite features of AppGyver, once you have set up the collection, there you go to the test tab, and you can run a test. What does that do? That basically makes the request back to the endpoint, and it tells you whether or not it was successful. It tells you if there was an error, or in my case that you're looking at here, it told me that the request was okay. The status was a 200. And not only that, it also gave me the output of the data that came from that request. I think by far this is one of my favorites, because not only I'm setting up how the app is going to consume the data, but also I can see that the data is coming in. I can see the data types. I can see the type of object that I'm getting. I can see the properties of that request, and so on. The second button here on the bottom is you can set the schema from the response, so that on your next request, or when you're setting up your controls when you're building the AppGyver app, each of those properties will be used later when you're using the UI binding. Again, this is to me one of the favorites, because if I was doing this in a no data service, then I have to know the UI, know the URL, go to the metadata, understand the data types, the types of operations, and so on. So all that is done here within the same feature, if you will. The post request and the put request, they're automatically disabled by default. So you just have to do a click on the method enable, and off you go. It's very simple to do. You just have to have a little bit of understanding on the web services, REST APIs, and how to consume that from a URL. Once my thought process is, once I have set up the data store, the data source, then I have that available for me on the UI so that I can start building my user interface, right? So in my example that I did here, I put a list item on my screen on the top, and then the tool tells me what are the HTML properties that I have access to that are optional for me to populate or to do additional capabilities, right? So here, since I had already set up my my schema, I just went to the primary label and I click here and I start doing my binding. Because I was consuming a collection of objects, a list of objects, right here on the bottom where it says repeat with, I basically selected my collection, which was the down here at the bottom, the data variables that was holding the pets collection that I set up on my OData data source. And you can see here's a collection of data records. You can do it by a collection or you can do it by a single record so that the control is smart enough to understand whether it's going to return an array of records or a single record. As you build more and more within AppGyver, you know, my learning process was, okay, let's put something on a label. Can we do this and show it? Yes. Can we go to a list? Yes. What happens when you don't have controls that are maybe simple controls like in HTML? You can also build your own. They're called components, right? A component is a reusable type of control that you can reuse from one page of a UI to another page. An example for that would be like a header in an application. You want to use the same header across, and you can create a component. Once you have created a component, you can reuse it, or there is also something called the marketplace where you can download additional components or additional controls, and it's all integrated within the same tool so that you can, you know, pick and choose whatever you're trying to do and achieve. And if you don't see one, then go to the marketplace and see if you can find one there. Here, it was basically the same screen where I was doing my binding. And since I said repeated as a pet, then my repeated object was the pet type and the price. And this was the same screen that I was showing you before, but now I'm highlighting how I did the binding. On the right side of the screen, I was going over, once I did the binding, then I went ahead and did a deployment so that I can test it on my browser. And then I set up my type of device, which was my Android device. And this same data is what I did on the set schema and gave me the output of that data. What else can you do in AppGyver besides setting labels and lists and all that? So you can do app navigation, right? You can click a button and say, go to this other page. Yeah, you have to create the 2 pages or the 3 pages and set up something as simple as you see here on the screen. You can do a confirm dialog, and if it is true, then go open a page, or you can say, hey, I want you to open an external page. I mean, those are pretty simple scenarios, but the understanding is the understanding of this application will build up your knowledge to do something more complex. Right here on the screen, it is a more complex scenario where now I have graduated from doing the simple controls, and now I'm doing native capabilities of the device. In this case, I'm using a scanner and a GPS, right? So, and once you select the button, in my case, it was a button that said, you know, open scanner. I used a component from the device to open the scan QR or barcode. And I'm setting that as my app variable so that I can use that later. If there was an error, then I'm displaying a toast message. Right after setting the app variable, then I'm also setting the geolocation and then I am showing something on my screen with the toast message, right? As you can see, it's flows connecting one component to the other, right? So then you might wonder, okay, so where can you use this, right? So there is multiple different scenarios. One of them could be at the manufacturing plant or anywhere where you have to scan a 2D barcode or a QR code. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. I took that same scanner and I was at home playing with it, and I grabbed this bottle of vitamins or something that we had at home, and I scanned it with my phone with the app that I had just put together, and it gave me you can see here that barcode. It's a scanning the barcode, and it gave me the GPS object with latitude, longitude, GPS locations, and all that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Uh, here you can test it in your office for whatever. I happened to be at home and I just wanted to scan something to see if it would really work with something outside of it. So yeah, it does work. It feels really good to do something like that. All right. So then once you have put your application together and you're happy with it, you're building something, you say, well, how do I see it, right? So within like I was saying, within the same AppGyver tool, you can go to the launch icon, and you go to the distribute page, and then you can open the build service. Once you do those two steps, it will open this page, and then it's going to tell you whether you want to deploy to iOS or to Android or to a web application. In my example, I was doing a web build, and you can see here that I have done a few different builds. Some of them that gave me an error. Some of them I just did a new build because I was adding additional stuff. And then the deployment goes to a subdomain of appgyverapps.com, unless you want to set up your own domain. You can use whatever your hosting provider is, and then do a redirection to this domain. I have not done an Android or an iOS app, but that's something that I'm currently working on. I'm working on an application for the Android phone, because the ways to do a deployment and make it available in the App Store is a little bit more straightforward, less strict than do it in the iOS. But eventually, I'll get to the iOS device. Me as a technical developer and knowing more technical stuff, right? People ask me, what are the pros and cons of this tool? Typical question when you're doing consulting. So what I like about it is that anybody with a little bit of technical knowledge can come in and they can develop apps. They can put GPS and the scanner and the simple controls and all that. You can deploy to any of the app stores. You can do a web deploy. You can have something immediately available. You can set up your OData service. You can see and test your web service, see the data coming in. That to me is a lot of value add, because I can do a demo within a few hours, as long as I have a backend service available. And yeah, there's a ton of them over there. The cons for this tool would be that it may require a little bit of technical knowledge if you're not a tech type of person, right? So this tool, if we make it available to the citizen developers, they will need to have a small training on maybe APIs, for example. They would need to understand the code deployment if they're doing that on their own. But if they're working with a technical developer, I don't see that as a disadvantage. Deploying to the iOS App Store, I said that it requires approval from Apple, and their rules are a little bit more strict. So it's not like I can do a web deployment every 2 minutes and continue to have my app live. For iOS, it takes a little bit more time. there may be a little bit of limited capabilities if in comparison to doing a full custom development. But we in our world of SAP, you're trying to avoid custom development. You're trying to follow SAP's best practices and standard apps and do minor extensions. So I don't think that's a big deal. Debugging may be one that if something doesn't come up immediately or correct the first time, if you're a technical developer, you know that you require a lot of patience. I have a lot of patience to do this stuff, but if we're trusting our citizen developers to do this, we basically have to explain and show them first before they would just throw them in there. So those are kind of like my comparisons, my pros and cons for this tool. There's other great guys out there. I have been following these guys that you see on the screen. Everything that I'm doing or learning is not just on my own. It's because I'm reading documentation and I'm talking to these guys. I'm seeing what they're building. I am there's a couple other guys that colleagues or people that I've met before at TechEd. I keep in touch. I have John from Colombia. I have Prashant. I have Atul, Manish. Some of these other guys that I have worked with. Mohan. Sometimes we bounce ideas, so I follow others. If you're gonna get into this, follow others, read documentation, share your experience. That to me is so valuable, right? Just help others if you can. So what is next for me, right? I was mentioning my low code, no code on Android. TechEd next week. I hope to see you there. If you're there, I will have a presentation also. I'm leading the community group in Dallas, so I hope that I can get more involvement from people here in, like I said, network and regular events and volunteer. I think that's it from me. I'm gonna hand it back to Svea.
Yes. Thanks so much, Sergio.
Absolutely.
Really interesting story what you mentioned, and it's really good. Then you mentioned also that you need to follow people. So I have, of course, added your profile link from the community to the chat. So hopefully everyone is going to join you, to follow you, and also the link to your Dallas group. Absolutely, people join the group if you're interested in to follow up with Sergio. Also, he shared some insights from his SAP Insight track, which I mentioned in the beginning. So all great resources to get in contact and to engage. All right. There are no questions so far in the chat. And again, dear audience, if you have a question, please feel free to write them in the chat and we will cover them at the end of the presentation. And Sergio, I always say, if there are no questions, you have explained it very well. So all good. And then, yes, everything okay from my side. I hand over to Mohan. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Svea, and thanks, Sergio, for a great presentation you had on the topic you chose. I'm gonna have something different topic, and we'll start going through that. Do you see my screen?
Not yet. Not yet.
Just one moment. How about the now?
Yes, it looks good. Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So the topic is provisioning SAP HANA instance on demand. I've been working as a SAP HANA administrator for last 10 years, or I can call it over a decade here. And we started back in like 2012 when SAP HANA was new, HANA 1.0, and ever since that time, there are several occasions we wanted to get our database set up for project requirements, and it used to take a lot of time. And Now in today's environment here, everything is automated, and this is about like we don't know how to do this repetitive task manually. So there's automation possible, and we'll go through this presentation details and see how we're doing it. This automation. Before we going details of presentation, this is the SAP disclaimer, and you can read that. Moving on to the agenda here, so we'll talk about what is the need for infrastructure automation. Some of you would already know why it is required, but just a brief overview of that. Then we'll talk about some tools and techniques that are required for the topic we chosen here. How do we get the HANA installation with some of the tools to automate that install process. Then there are a few details explained on the provisioning architecture, how the servers and installation happens. We'll not go too much details on the actual steps, and with the time constraint, we'll try to cover as much as we can. And I believe this will be a good introduction to system administrators or technical resources interested in standing up the SAP HANA instances quickly. Moving on to this first topic here about like what do we need automation. Because if we have some HANA instance, like want to create a picture in front of your eyes, that when you want a new database, what do is you go with the demand saying, okay, I need this database of this much size, say 64 GB, and then that demand is registered, then it is reviewed by architecture, then there are some system or Linux administrators are involved, HANA DBAs are involved, infrastructure, security. So it's a long process of the actual work can be done within a day or few hours if you want to. However, there are various things happen, and those kind of like should be straightened out. And especially when there are like hundreds of projects going on, they want to get something quickly in this AWS cloud environment. You can spin up a new server, but how do we get this HANA database on top of it? So we'll go through those details. One other thing is that when doing this manually, someone can say, okay, but it's not like quite frequently required. However, if you look for like there is sandbox development, QA, test, and multiple projects and simulations, so many requirements come up. Also, there's special programs where you want to get this thing instance ready, and then there's a limited availability of the technical resources to stand up that resource, and that's where kind of a lot of wait time gets into picture, and it takes a lot of time to deliver the actual HANA database to the project team want to utilize it. So the leadership at my company had given a directive about like infrastructure. Why don't you look into the infrastructure as a code? Anyone not just the technical skills required should be able to spin up a new instance. Of course, there will be some access and checks available to avoid creating too many instances redundant instances and all. So that will be part of some administrative task. However, if you see the bottom line there, we want to have instance on a click of a button. So if you just go and say, I want this instance, and then click of a button is, yes, you can bring it up, and it will be configured with whatever parameters you can set up, like what size, and we'll go through some of those in the consequent slides coming over here. So what type of tools required for this type this activity in order to utilize this automation infrastructure as a code? Here are some of the things highlighted. All of us know this Git repository is the best way to put all this infrastructure code in it. You can have the CI/CD pipeline approach for whatever enhancement you do it, and the automated deployment continues to happen into the environment. And this can be deployed in cloud or on-prem environment. In cloud, we have been primarily utilizing the AWS cloud environment approved for our company, and that is used to set up EC2 instances. And then there are some way, like once you stand up the instance, once you stand up the Linux server, need to have the HANA install, and the installer can are big files like 4 GB, 5 GBs, larger files. Those we can't package it and include it in our Git repository or any other places. So we can utilize the S3 buckets where all this can be hosted. Or there's also when you are running this on-prem, same thing can be achieved by like there's no on-prem AWS. There's a VM servers or vSphere. They call it. Is the automated way of carving out capacity and standing up a server. And on-prem environment, there's a Nexus. So we all know content management, simple photos, pictures. You do a Dropbox, you manage your pictures. So likewise, for the software packages and all, Nexus can have a repository controlled by user access control authentication, and it can store all your installation software on it, which can be downloaded for a project. Then the Terraform is another way. In AWS, you might be familiar with CloudFormation. Scripts can be utilized to stand up instance automated fashion. Likewise, there is another partner came up with this Terraform as open source software, and it's widely used now for standing up servers, which gets a template information about what are the storage requirements or the host name and all those details, and then it is used to stand up the infrastructures. Once the infrastructure is ready, then we need to utilize the software installation for SAP HANA, and there we utilize the Ansible playbook. Ansible coding technique can be used there to get those playbooks, reading all those and automation of those steps. So this is a good snippet. We talked about those multiple tools and techniques and how it is done. So it gives you kind of a bird's eye view of like how those things are involved here. To start with, GitLab, you have a repository created in the Git with all the codes stored where Terraform and Ansible scripts are updated. And there is a GitLab runner which will spin up a container, a container, which because there is nothing there, we are starting a new server from building it from scratch, and for that it requires some container which will pick up all this template, and using the Terraform provisioning process, it will go and spin off a new server. And once that is available, then as we talked about S3 buckets or on-prem, there will be an access repository which can be accessed to pull the installer software, and another Ansible coding script utilized, which will make use of that to install the SAP HANA on top of that Linux server. A few more details to talk about the server provisioning. Really mention some templates and all, like what kind of information is required in the templates is typically the usernames, passwords, then the database, what name you want to, like database SID, system identifier file, it will define, and there are keys for connectivity, and all those information can be provided as an input, and that will be gathered to standing up the server. One thing I would like to highlight here is for standing up standing up here our Linux server, you can, in AWS environment, you might be familiar with there is an AMI, standard AMI image that can be picked up and stand up a server. However, the quite popular way of followed in the business is using the service catalog. So AWS service catalog is not just the baseline, say for instance, Red Hat Linux 7.6, it's not the standard vanilla version of it. For installing SAP HANA database, it requires some additional add-on software components. Those can be bundled into this catalog. Also, any of your organization-specific standards, those can be included in it, and it also provides the way of managing license on your way than getting licensing from AWS. We have bulk licensing, that could be another advantage. And finally, this is centrally managed. So if we use this catalogs, then all the Linux instances spin off using this catalog will be look all similar, and manage it will be easier to manage those things. So SAP HANA installation, once the server is stood up, it will be installed. Before we get there, I mean, it's the standard Git repository. You get all the Ansible code for installing. I mean, one can say it just involves, like, what do you say, get the installer and just run the HDB inst and all, and that is fine. But there are some prerequisites. You want to define various groups and security provisions, and all the added requirements applicable for your environment, and that's where it requires coding various aspects there, and Ansible, and include those in this automation of not just installing the baseline HANA instance, but it also incorporates all those things in place. So this snippet is showing me the title of this presentation is like running this standing up the HANA instance on demand within an hour. It actually, I mean, it took like 35 minutes here if you look at it, and there are various jobs. So basically, we split the task in segment of codes. We call it as a job, and those are running one after another. and it shows how quickly this is standing up the server. Here is a little more details on the jobs being processed. The first one, Terraform create, is like less than a minute, and then the running that Terraform script on the container and actually standing up the server. It's about
Mohan, sorry to interrupt you. The audio is getting a little bit bad.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now it's again better.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, so we're talking about various steps takes here. The main thing is like standing up server takes a chunk of time, and then check results, and this another job is about actual installation. So it's pretty quick, and once this thing is installed, you can include few additional post-install steps. For example, before giving this instance to the project teams and all, you need to register with SAP support, get a license, apply a license, hit backup and whatnot. I mean, there's a few things you can come up, but most probably, I mean, those would be the standard processes, and that's why we're saying like you can stand up the instance within an hour here. It's a catchy phrase, but that's kind of, I believe, helps encouraging project teams and asking, okay, I need one this specific instance for this particular test, and then once the test is done, you can just destroy that instance so much easier. This is here now. You see, talking about some details on what are those jobs, we call it as jobs, kind of code snippets within this automation running. First is about Terraform create. It's going to take an input parameters, what's the host name and all the templates specific like disk sizes and all this information, and build up a code that will be run in the next job. We'll be actually creating the server and getting it ready for HANA installation. The third job is about verifying all server stand-up process is good, checks and balances if there are any issues. We've seen sometimes catalog is not valid, or basically it does some validations and checking and making sure things are good there before we start the actual install. And then this is the install process. So this will be up to the step number 3, baseline install is done. However, in order to make it work, you will have to bring in some of the objects and catalogs, tables, schemas, content, where the calculation views or any of the other configurations, data replication techniques, SDIs like smart data integration and HANA Live and extended applications and whatnot. I mean, there's several other things that are required to make instance readily available. Otherwise, I mean, just standard baseline instance will not be good enough. So that's a challenging task. We have a couple of slides explain a few more details on that. We'll go over those quickly. And finally, this job destroy is like once all testing and usage is done, then you can just destroy that instance. Single click, it just goes away. This is an example of whatever we've seen earlier, those jobs, and recently we built this, and just want to show it. It is SAP HANA SP5 patch 5903. So this is the latest version. We are up to date on it and using that for standing up the instance. It's a 64 GB size instance. So moving on, this slide talks about how do we, like, what are the things involved in after the baseline instance is done, ready, you cannot just give that thing to the project teams. Whatever application specific contents are there, like it would be catalog schemas and all, let's say you see it here, that needs to be overlaid on top of the baseline HANA instance. And one of the approach quite commonly used by system admins and all is like maintain a golden image of whatever application you're using it, and then use that as for overlaying on top of the baseline instance. So it's much easier. We can just get that database overlay on top of it. It's pretty quick. Another option is Git repository. You maintain all the code, and so we don't. Some of the requirements are like we don't want to maintain that golden copy. And why don't we build everything from scratch and all the code and configurations. If you're using HDI HANA deployment infrastructure, and then automatically all the code is stored in the Git repository, and you can use the MTA files and bring in all that thing easily. If that's not the case, then you need to think about like how do we capture, for instance, we have been having a data warehousing application with thousands of calculation views and native way tables and schemas, and so we've been utilizing some of the custom ways to extract those without the data and then put it into a Git repository, and that can be overlaid on top of the baseline install. So here's a quick comparison. It could be easier to go with the gold copy instance, but then you have to maintain that gold instance without the data, any code promotions and all. So it will be a separate instance where you maintain that, where in your transport path, one of the branch would be before you send it to production, that code is going in to that gold instance and then use that for overlaying and standing up these instances. And another way is use the Git repository and maintain all the code into that, and then we'll get it there. So preferred approach is this Git repository and all. But as I said, like we have a lot of native development and all, and there's not much in the Git repo, and it becomes challenging to manage with that kind of code. A quick time check. I'm getting towards here. So some of the challenges while building these automation, the quite common thing is like system administrators and all, they are saying we configure, install things. We are not developer. We cannot do code. It's infrastructure as a code is more of a coding, and that requires some serious learning of Ansible, Terraform, Cloud. So there's a learning curve. However, once you get to it, you will like it. And there are ways people have been kind of trying to automate the thing. Like one can say, what's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing again and again in the same way, rather than doing that. You can come up with some smart ways of doing things and let the computer system do the work and stand up the instance. There are some testing times. Initially, when you are standing up these instances, there are ways you can validate the code, because if you like running this instance installation, and it takes a lot of time. I need to test code segments separately and bring in there. There could be some network issues, and cost-wise also, like if you are building a lot of test instances in the cloud, your meter is running for all that instances sitting there. So if you are not using it, shut it down or destroy it when nobody is required to use that. So how do someone interested can look into getting into this business of infrastructure as a code, standing up SAP HANA instance and all? So there is a very good open SAP course with this title. If you search on it, easily accessible, freely available. You can look into that. It also gives some intro about what is Ansible and how do you stand up those instances using automation. So that will be a good go-to place. Someone is interested in trying it out on their own. A few other SAP guide and SAP HANA Academy links, those you would be familiar. You can check on those. And think that's about it. That I'll call the wrap and have some time to question and answer. You can refer to SAP Community website for if there are no questions. The questions will address it. If not, you can have follow-up questions there. Thank you. I'll hand it back to Svea.
Yes, thanks so much also from your side. If you could stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
We can spend a couple of more minutes. So are there any final tips you want to give our audience? One sentence, a little wrap up, also for you, Sergio.
Yeah, I would go first real quick. Like it might feel overwhelming to start with this type of infrastructure as a code, especially with resources. I've been doing these kind of tasks routinely, manually, several days. I used to do it. Why do you want to do that? But it requires some new thinking, and it's going to help save your time and give you better satisfaction that, okay, I'm standing up this on automated fashion.
Great. Cool. And for you, Sergio, do you have any final advice on the AppGyver stuff?
If you want to learn it, be patient and link to others, network. That's the best way to learn it.
Yeah, patience. I mean, patience is very important these days, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can only thank you for being part of these community calls. I think it was really interesting. And as I said before, you both have explained and showed everything very well. And thanks also so much for showing this again. I mean, you have presented this already in person at the SAP HANA in Dallas. So it's really great that you gave our audience the opportunity as well to show this virtually. Thanks so much. There are no questions in the chat. So I give everyone 2 minutes back of their time. And I wish everyone a great day ahead. And next week is SAP TechEd. Safe travels to you, Sergio, and everyone else. Register now. Don't miss to register for SAP TechEd.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.